Ariana Cole stepped into the airport with a tired smile, carrying a small black handbag and a worn travel jacket that made her look like an ordinary working woman returning home after a long day. No one who looked at her could guess who she really was. Her face was calm, humble, soft, and warm. She moved like someone who didn't want attention. She didn't wear expensive clothes or shout for service. She was the kind of woman people easily ignored, and that was exactly what happened from the moment she walked toward her gate. Many passengers waiting in line glanced at her briefly, and their eyes moved on without a second thought. Some people even stepped in front of her, thinking she wouldn't mind. And she didn't. Ariana simply smiled and let them. She never liked fights, and she never demanded respect. She believed kindness was a silent power that didn't need to speak. What no one knew, what not a single person in that entire airport imagined, was that the quiet woman standing in line was the owner of the very plane they were about to board. She was the billionaire CEO of Cole Air, one of the fastest-growing airline companies in the world. But Ariana disliked being treated differently, so she often traveled without telling anyone who she was. It was her little way of staying connected to real life, to real people, and to the world outside her huge office windows. When boarding started, Ariana stepped forward, still smiling gently at everyone around her. A mother with a baby looked stressed, so Ariana helped her lift her bag. The woman thanked her, but even she didn't look closely enough to recognize her. Ariana didn't mind at all. Helping others quietly was part of her nature. Inside the aircraft, Ariana walked down the aisle, searching for her seat. Economy class was almost full, with passengers squeezing past each other, placing bags in overhead bins, and trying to settle quickly. No one moved to give her space. No one looked at her with respect. To them, she was just another tired traveler trying to reach her destination. Then she noticed something unusual. The flight crew at the front didn't greet her. They greeted almost everyone else. But when Ariana passed, they didn't smile. They didn't say, "Welcome aboard." One of them even rolled his eyes as if she was slowing the line. She didn't understand why, but again, she let it go. She had seen rude people before. It didn't bother her. She believed everyone had a bad day sometimes. But someone on that flight didn't just have a bad day. He had a bad attitude. Flight attendant Mark Bennett stood in the middle of the aisle, blocking the path. His arms were crossed, and his face carried a frustrated expression. He looked like someone who had stopped caring about his job a long time ago. When Ariana reached him, he didn't step aside. Instead, he frowned. "You're holding up the line," he said sharply. Ariana blinked in surprise. She wasn't holding anything. She wasn't blocking anyone. She was just walking like everyone else. But Mark's eyes looked at her as if she was an inconvenience. "Oh, I'm sorry," Ariana said softly, trying to move aside. Mark didn't accept her apology. He looked her from head to toe, judging her simple clothes and small bag. He assumed she was a low-class passenger, someone he didn't have to respect. Other passengers watched quietly, unsure of what to say. Some shook their heads at Mark's behavior, but no one stepped forward to help Ariana. She tried to step around him carefully, but the aisle was narrow, and she didn't want to bump into anyone. Mark suddenly sighed loudly, grabbed her arm, and pushed her aside just enough to squeeze past. He didn't shove her hard, not yet, but the gesture was rough, unnecessary, and humiliating. Ariana steadied herself, holding her bag close to her chest. She didn't complain. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked down and continued to her seat. Her quiet reaction made some people uncomfortable. A young boy in the next row whispered, "Why did he push her?" His mother pulled him close and told him to stay quiet. Ariana sat down gently, taking a slow breath. She had traveled enough times to know that bad behavior sometimes came from stress. She didn't want to judge him too soon. Instead, she looked out the window, watching the airport workers move below. Her eyes softened with sadness, not because she was hurt physically, but because she had seen this pattern too many times. People misjudged her because of her simple appearance and her skin color. People assumed she didn't belong in big spaces. People assumed she wasn't someone important. But she knew something they didn't. She knew the truth always comes out, one way or another. She knew that respect was never owned, it was earned. And she knew that sometimes life tested her to see if she would rise above anger. Little did Ariana know, the biggest test of her patience was still ahead. The moment that would shock the entire plane had not happened yet. The flight hadn't even taken off. Mark's disrespect was only the beginning. Something much bigger, much louder, and much more humiliating was coming. And when it happened, everyone on that plane would learn the truth about the woman they all misjudged. And one person, especially, would regret it the most. Mark Bennett walked up and down the aisle with the same attitude he carried every day, an attitude heavy with ego, impatience, and a strange sense of superiority. He believed he understood people the moment he looked at them. He believed rich passengers always dressed rich. He believed important people always acted important. And he believed anyone who looked simple must be treated simple. That belief was about to cost him more than he could ever imagine. As he reached Ariana's row again, his eyes narrowed. She sat quietly, hands folded, looking out the window. She didn't complain. She didn't call him out. She didn't even glance at him. That bothered him more than he expected. Something about her calmness made him feel challenged, as if she was silently judging him. He didn't like that. He cleared his throat loudly. "Ma'am, make sure your bag is under the seat. Not beside your feet," he said in a strict tone. Ariana looked down. Her bag was already perfectly placed. "It is under the seat," she said softly. Mark didn't even look. "Make it tighter." "Follow the rules," he snapped. Other passengers raised eyebrows. They could see Ariana wasn't doing anything wrong. But no one spoke. People on flights rarely interfered with crew behavior. The uniform created power. And Mark used that power in all the wrong ways. A man across the aisle whispered to his wife, "He's treating her differently." "Why?" The wife shook her head. "Maybe he's stressed," she said. "Or maybe he's just used to picking on quiet people." Mark moved on, still in a bad mood, still convinced he was right. But passengers weren't blind. They noticed the way he addressed Ariana. They noticed the tone. They noticed the unnecessary commands. Something felt unfair. Something felt wrong. Ariana continued to stay silent, even though her heart tightened each time he spoke harshly. She wasn't weak. She simply believed that reacting with anger only fed someone else's ego. She believed silence had power, too. But her silence became a mystery. A little girl sitting one row behind leaned forward. "Mommy, why is that lady so calm?" Her mother whispered, "Some people stay calm even when others are unkind. Maybe she's stronger than she looks." The calmness that puzzled the little girl would soon puzzle the entire plane. It wasn't the calmness of fear or helplessness, it was the calmness of someone who didn't need to prove herself. Someone who already knew who she was. Ariana checked her phone quietly. She had no desire to report anyone. She had no interest in embarrassing Mark. But she did type a message to her assistant, "Just boarded, landing in 4 hours, will need a meeting with HR soon after." She didn't mention names. She didn't explain what happened. She simply prepared. She always prepared. Before the plane took off, the cabin supervisor, Linda, walked through the aisle doing her final check. Linda was older, more experienced, and respected by most passengers. She paused when she saw Ariana. Something about Ariana's expression made her slow down. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" she asked gently. Ariana smiled politely. "Everything is fine. Thank you." Linda sensed something unsaid, but she didn't push further. She continued her walk. But the moment she passed Mark, she heard him mutter under his breath, "These economy people are always so slow." Linda shot him a sharp look. "Watch your tone, Mark," she warned quietly. He rolled his eyes when she walked away. And once again, Ariana saw everything but said nothing. The engine started, the cabin lights dimmed, and the plane taxied onto the runway. Passengers settled, but an uneasy feeling settled with them. Something dark was hanging in the air. Something unspoken. Something that felt like it was waiting to explode. Ariana closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She wasn't angry. She wasn't scared. She was simply disappointed, disappointed in how quickly people judged others based on appearance. It wasn't the first time she experienced it. But something about this moment felt heavier. Mark walked past her again during takeoff instructions. He leaned close and said quietly, "Try not to cause delays this time." The words stung, not because of what he said, but because of the meaning behind them. Ariana looked at him for the first time, really looked. Her eyes were calm but deep. She didn't have to speak for him to feel something shift inside him, something uncomfortable, something like shame trying to wake up. He looked away immediately. The plane lifted into the sky. Passengers fastened their seatbelts and tried to relax. But the tension didn't relax. It grew. Because everyone could sense one thing now. Mark was not finished. Ariana's silence wasn't enough for him. And the real confrontation, the moment that would change everything, was coming soon. The flight settled into the air, but the tension inside the cabin only became sharper, like a quiet storm waiting to break. Most passengers tried to watch movies or read, but their eyes kept shifting toward Ariana. Something about her calm silence drew everyone's attention. People could sense when someone was being treated unfairly, and Mark's behavior had already crossed lines. Mark, however, walked around the aisle with more confidence than before. In his mind, Ariana's quiet reactions meant she was scared of him. He believed silence was weakness. He believed authority came from raising his voice. He believed passengers existed to obey him. And now he wanted to push further, not because Ariana had done anything wrong, but because his ego demanded control. When drink service started, Mark approached Ariana's row again. He didn't smile. He didn't greet her. He simply placed a plastic cup on the tray table so loudly that the passenger next to Ariana flinched. "Water," he said sharply, "you can't have anything else right now." Ariana blinked, confused. Other passengers were getting full service, juices, snacks, tea, even wine. She hadn't asked for anything special. She hadn't asked for anything at all. Still, she responded gently, "I didn't request anything yet." Mark leaned down, his voice low but filled with irritation. "Don't make things complicated. Just drink the water." Passengers nearby exchanged shocked looks. A man whispered, "She didn't do anything. Why is he acting like this?" A middle-aged woman whispered back, "He has a problem with her. It's clear." Ariana stayed calm. She lifted the water cup slowly, as if she didn't want the moment to escalate. That small gesture, so soft, so patient, irritated Mark even more. He expected anger. He expected fear. But her calmness felt like silent resistance. Mark stood up straight and walked away with heavy steps, but he couldn't leave the matter alone. Something inside him kept pulling him back toward Ariana, like his ego was hungry for attention, hungry for power, hungry to force her to acknowledge him. And then it happened. The moment that sent a shock through the entire cabin. The moment that changed everything. A baby cried from 2 rows behind Ariana. A young mother tried to soothe her child, rocking him gently. She needed space to move her elbow, so she stood halfway into the aisle. Mark rushed over instantly. "Sit down," he snapped, "you're blocking the walkway." The mother looked frightened. Ariana turned slightly in her seat, worried the woman might get in trouble for something innocent. It's okay, Ariana said softly, trying to comfort her. Do you need help? But Mark misinterpreted it. He thought Ariana was talking back to him. He thought she was challenging his authority. That one gentle sentence was all it took to spark his worst reaction yet. He strode toward Ariana, fast and angry. Before anyone could react, he reached out and shoved her shoulder to push past her, harder than before, with a force no one expected. Ariana jerked sideways in her seat. Her arm hit the armrest. Her bag tumbled to the floor. Gasps filled the cabin. Hey! What are you doing? Someone shouted. That was unnecessary, another voice cried. A child screamed in fear. The mother who had been standing held her baby tight, her eyes wide with shock. Everyone saw it. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't frustration. This was humiliation, public, physical, cruel. Ariana slowly straightened herself, her eyes lowered. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't ask why. She simply picked up her bag with shaking hands and placed it on her lap. Her silence was louder now. Much louder. Passengers whispered, "Who is she? Why is she so calm after that?" One old man murmured, "People don't stay that quiet unless they know something we don't." Mark realized too late what he had just done. For a brief second, shock flashed in his eyes. He hadn't expected Ariana to look so fragile, so composed, so dignified after such disrespect. His anger began to fade, and something colder replaced it, fear. Linda, the cabin supervisor, rushed forward. "Mark! What did you just do?" she demanded. Mark stuttered, She was blocking the aisle." "No, she wasn't," passengers shouted. Linda knelt beside Ariana. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "I'm so sorry." Ariana gave a small smile. "I'm fine. Please don't worry." But that calm smile terrified Mark more than anything. Because in that moment, deep inside, he knew. This woman wasn't ordinary. This woman wasn't weak. This woman had the kind of strength that didn't need to scream. And the truth about who she really was getting ready to explode through the quiet cabin like a thunderstorm. And when it came, Mark's life would change forever. The cabin grew so silent that even the sound of the engine seemed distant. Everyone watched Ariana, waiting to see how she would react after being shoved so harshly. But Ariana only sat quietly, her hands resting on her bag, her eyes lowered, breathing slowly as if calming herself from inside. Her calmness didn't feel weak anymore. It felt powerful, like someone holding back a storm behind her ribs. Linda, the cabin supervisor, stood protectively beside Ariana's seat, her voice trembling with anger. "Mark, step away from her. Right now." Mark swallowed hard. His confidence was fading, melting under the weight of dozens of eyes staring at him, angry, shocked, disappointed. For the first time in hours, he felt small. Very small. Passengers whispered urgently among themselves. "She didn't deserve that," a man said. "She didn't even talk back," another replied. "Who treats a woman like that? And a black woman on top of that," someone muttered angrily. Every whisper made Mark's chest tighten. He could feel the judgment burning through the air, thick and heavy like smoke. Yet his ego refused to stay quiet. He forced a shrug and said, "She was in the way. I needed to pass." "No, she wasn't," a teenager snapped from the back. "We all saw what happened." Phones began recording. Cameras pointed at Mark from every angle. And for the first time in his career, he did not feel like a flight attendant with authority. He felt like a man standing on a cliff with the ground already slipping. Linda turned back to Ariana. "Ma'am, I'm deeply sorry. Please allow me to file an official report. This behavior is unacceptable." Ariana shook her head gently. "I don't want to make a scene," she said softly. But her words created even more mystery. Why didn't she want justice? Why wasn't she angry? Why wasn't she demanding consequences? People didn't stay this calm, not after being humiliated, not after being disrespected, not after being physically shoved. Unless they didn't need anger. Unless they already had power. A young woman across the aisle leaned close to her husband and whispered, "She must be someone important. No normal person would stay this composed." Her husband nodded slowly. "I feel it too, something is different about her." Mark heard these whispers and panicked inside. He had a sudden urge to defend himself. "Look, she's exaggerating this," he blurted out. "She's pretending to be the victim." That was the wrong sentence. Because every single person on that plane had seen what he did. The old man who had been quiet the whole time now spoke with surprising force. "Young man, stop lying. We all saw you push her. That was not an accident." Mark opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face reddened. His hands trembled. For the first time, he looked like someone who understood the weight of his mistake. Ariana lifted her eyes and looked at him. It wasn't a harsh look. It wasn't a hateful look. It was calm, and disappointed. Disappointment hit harder than anger. It made Mark feel even smaller, as if her silence was louder than any shout could ever be. He blinked and stepped back. "Fine. Whatever," he muttered, trying to hide his shaking hands. Linda moved quickly toward the front of the plane, needing to contact the captain about the escalating situation. Passengers continued whispering, and a sense of suspense wrapped around the cabin like thick air. Then something strange happened. A flight attendant from first class walked into economy, holding a tablet. She scanned the seats, searching for someone. When her eyes stopped on Ariana, her expression shifted from confusion to realization. She turned pale. "Oh," she whispered, "it's her." She quickly turned away and hurried toward the front, leaving passengers even more confused. What did she mean? Who was her? Why did she look so shocked? People exchanged puzzled looks. Something wasn't normal. Something big was hiding behind Ariana's quiet face. Ariana took a deep breath and opened her phone, typing a message with slow, thoughtful movements. No one saw the screen, but everyone sensed she wasn't messaging a friend. She was contacting someone important, someone who could do something. Mark saw her texting and felt his entire stomach twist. His heartbeat thumped loudly in his ears. He finally realized something terrible. He hadn't shoved an ordinary woman. He hadn't insulted a helpless passenger. He had humiliated someone far above him, someone whose calm silence now terrified him more than any angry scream. Ariana locked her phone and looked ahead, her eyes thoughtful, almost sad. She didn't look like someone planning revenge. She looked like someone who understood far more than everyone else. The plane continued through the sky, but inside the cabin, a storm of questions and fear swirled around Ariana's quiet presence. And before the flight landed, the truth about her identity would come crashing down on Mark like lightning. A truth that would shake the entire crew. A truth that would change the entire flight. And a truth that Mark was not ready for. The plane continued its journey through the clouds, but inside the cabin, everything felt tight, tense, and unstable. The passengers kept glancing at Ariana, the woman who had stayed calm through everything. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't complained. She hadn't argued. And that silence made everyone, even the crew, feel something was coming. Mark stood near the galley, rubbing his hands together nervously. His confidence had drained out of him drop by drop ever since he shoved Ariana. His mind kept replaying the moment, the gasp of passengers, the way she looked at him, calm and disappointed. That look haunted him more than any angry scream. Linda, the cabin supervisor, whispered to the captain through the small phone near the door. Her face wore a stiff seriousness no one in economy had ever seen from her. She kept glancing at Ariana's seat as she spoke. The captain's voice was faint but stern. "We must handle this carefully, Linda. This is serious. Do not escalate the situation." Linda nodded slowly, her eyes filled with caution and concern. Meanwhile, Ariana sat in quiet thought, typing one last message on her phone. She wrote only a few words, but the tone of her fingers on the screen was controlled and purposeful. She pressed send. Then she placed the phone down gently and folded her hands. Her message had already reached the ground. Her assistant had already replied. And the airline's board already knew what happened at 30,000 feet. But Ariana didn't tell anyone around her. She didn't need to. The cabin felt heavier now, as if everyone sensed destiny moving closer. A teenage girl leaned toward her father and whispered, "Dad. I think she's someone really important." Her father nodded. "Yes. And I think Mark made the biggest mistake of his life." Mark tried to continue his duties, but every step felt harder, every breath heavier. He was sweating. His uniform felt tight. His throat felt dry. He kept sneaking glances toward Ariana, hoping, desperately hoping, she wouldn't look back. But she didn't even acknowledge him anymore. Her silence cut deeper than confrontation. Then everything changed. A soft chime sounded above the cabin. A sound only crew members understood. It was the captain calling. Linda hurried forward. After a brief conversation, she walked back down the aisle with trembling hands and an unreadable expression. Passengers looked at her expectantly. Even Ariana lifted her eyes slightly, sensing the shift in the air. Then Linda stopped right beside Ariana's seat. "Ma'am," she said with controlled breath, "we received an urgent message from headquarters. They are requesting confirmation of your identity." Ariana looked up gently and nodded. "I understand." Linda hesitated. "May I ask for your full name, please?" The passengers leaned forward, holding their breath. Ariana spoke softly, but her words echoed through the cabin. "My name is Ariana Cole." A few passengers blinked, confused. The name meant nothing to them. But to the airline crew, it meant everything. Linda froze. Mark went completely pale. The first-class attendant who had recognized Ariana earlier appeared again, her face white as paper. She whispered to Linda, "It's her, it's really her." Now the passengers were curious. "Who is she?" a woman asked loudly. Linda turned slowly toward the cabin, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Ariana Cole is the CEO of Cole Air." A wave of shock rushed through the plane so fast it felt like a physical force. Gasps exploded from every row. People covered their mouths. Some even stood from their seats. "That quiet lady? She owns the airline." "You're joking." "No way, her." Mark stumbled back as if someone had punched him. His world spun. His knees felt weak. His breathing cracked. "No, no, no," he whispered, grabbing the wall for support. He realized every insult, every harsh word, every shove, had been directed at the owner of the company that paid his salary. Ariana remained calm, her expression unchanged. She didn't look proud or angry. She simply nodded once, politely, acknowledging everyone's shock. The teenage girl whispered, "She's so calm, even though she's a billionaire." Her father replied, "True power doesn't need to scream." Linda bent slightly, almost like a bow. "Ma'am, headquarters is calling again. They want to speak directly with you after landing. They also said, they are deeply sorry." Ariana smiled kindly. "There's no need to apologize for the entire company." Her eyes turned toward Mark. He made his choices alone. Those 7 words hit Mark harder than thunder. He felt exposed, ashamed, helpless. Passengers watched, silent and wide-eyed, as Ariana turned her gaze back to the window like nothing special had happened. But something very special had happened. Her identity was no longer a mystery. Her power was no longer invisible. And now, the consequences were coming. Not with anger. Not with revenge. But with something far more unforgettable. Something Mark would feel for the rest of his life. And the entire plane knew. Part 6 would bring the moment he feared the most. The plane continued smoothly through the sky, but inside the cabin, nothing felt smooth anymore. A strange silence wrapped around the passengers like a heavy blanket. Everyone knew now. Everyone understood who Ariana Cole truly was, the billionaire CEO, the owner of the airline, the woman Mark had humiliated without mercy. Mark's hands shook so badly that he had to hide them behind his back. His throat felt tight, and his heartbeat sounded louder than the engines. Each second felt like a countdown to disaster. He watched Ariana from a distance with wide, terrified eyes, as if looking at a powerful storm sitting quietly in seat 14A. Ariana didn't move much. She rested her hands on her lap and looked outside the window with calm eyes that hid deep thoughts. She wasn't angry. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't even proud. Her silence held a strange kind of gravity, like she already knew how everything would unfold. Passengers still stared at her in disbelief. "I can't believe she's the owner," a man whispered. "How did he shove her?" "How?" another woman asked. The teenage girl spoke softly, "She's so calm. I would be screaming." Her father replied, "That's why she's a leader. She knows when to speak and when to wait." Mark squeezed his eyes shut. He wished he could rewind everything, erase every rude word he said, erase the shove, erase the attitude. But nothing could be undone. The truth had already spread through the cabin like wildfire. Linda approached Ariana again with a respectful posture. "Ma'am, headquarters confirmed they'll handle everything once we land. They want you to know that they're taking this matter extremely seriously." Ariana nodded politely. "Thank you, Linda." Her voice was soft, but even that softness made Linda straighten her back. "And Mark?" Ariana asked quietly. Linda swallowed. He knows what he's done." Ariana didn't reply. She didn't need to. Everyone knew what those words meant. She wasn't going to shout, demand, or embarrass him. Her silence alone carried enough weight to make an entire airline shake. A few minutes later, the captain made an announcement, his voice unusually formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, we request that all passengers remain seated for the remainder of the flight. Thank you for your cooperation." Everyone knew why. Ariana closed her eyes for a moment. She thought not about revenge, but about fairness, dignity, and the importance of treating people with respect. She had worked her whole life building a company that valued kindness. Today she had seen the opposite of that value from one of her own employees. But she also believed in giving people a chance to learn. Mark finally gathered the courage to walk down the aisle. Slowly, painfully. Every step felt like walking toward a courtroom. Passengers followed him with sharp eyes. Some glared. Some shook their heads. Some filmed him quietly. He stopped beside Ariana's seat. "Ma'am," he whispered, his voice weak and trembling, I didn't know who you were." Ariana opened her eyes and looked at him gently. "You shouldn't treat people with respect only when you know who they are." Those words hit him harder than any punishment ever could. His lips trembled. I'm truly sorry." Ariana watched him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable, calm, steady, serious but not cruel. "You pushed me," she said softly, "you insulted me. You treated me as if I was less." Mark lowered his head. I know I was wrong." Passengers waited in absolute silence for her next words. Ariana took a slow breath. I won't ask for your job to be taken away. Gasps filled the cabin. Mark's head snapped up, hope lighting in his eyes. But, she continued, I also cannot allow this behavior to continue. His hope dimmed again. You will undergo a full disciplinary review, she said. You will attend mandatory respect and sensitivity training. And for a period of time, you will work under supervision. Mark nodded quickly, tears forming. Yes, ma'am. Anything. Thank you. Thank you. Her expression softened slightly. This isn't punishment, Mark. This is an opportunity to become better. The entire plane went silent, because none of them expected this. None expected kindness after such humiliation. None expected mercy after such disrespect. But that was who Ariana was. A leader who believed in reform, not revenge. Mark stepped back, tears running down his cheeks, overwhelmed with shame and gratitude. Passengers watched him with softened eyes. Perhaps some of them even respected him a little, for facing his mistake instead of running from it. Ariana lifted her gaze and looked around the cabin. Everyone deserves dignity, she said quietly. Everyone. And with those words, the entire mood of the plane changed. Not because she punished someone. Not because she was powerful. But because she showed what true power actually looked like. Quiet. Calm. And deeply human. But the story was not over. Because when the plane landed, something unexpected awaited all of them. Something even Ariana didn't see coming. And part 7 would reveal it. The wheels touched the runway with a gentle thump, but the moment the plane began to slow, the cabin filled with an energy no one could describe, half suspense, half fear, and half curiosity. Every passenger sat still, waiting to see what would happen next. They had just witnessed something unforgettable at 30,000 feet, and the story wasn't finished yet. Ariana took a soft breath, her calm face glowing with quiet strength. She looked out the window at the airport lights flickering through the dusk. She had flown hundreds of times before. She owned the airline. But this landing felt different. Heavy. Meaningful. Mark stood frozen near the galley, too afraid to move. His entire body felt weak, as if his legs belonged to someone else. He kept wiping his palms on his uniform, but they stayed sweaty. He wasn't terrified of Ariana anymore, he was terrified of himself, of the choices he made, of the lesson he finally understood. As the plane rolled toward the gate, passengers unfastened their seatbelts, turning toward Ariana instead of the exit. They didn't want to miss a second of what would happen next. Linda approached Ariana with deep respect. Ma'am, your escort team is waiting outside. They're already informed. Ariana nodded gently. Thank you, Linda. You handled everything professionally. Linda's eyes softened. I'm sorry you had to experience this on your own plane. Ariana smiled faintly. Sometimes life gives us reminders at unexpected moments. The plane came to a complete stop. The door opened. Cool air rushed inside. And then, the entire cabin gasped. A group of senior executives in dark suits waited at the gate, forming a silent line. Beside them stood security officers, all with serious expressions. Passengers pulled out phones, they had never seen anything like this. The first-class attendant whispered, trembling, they sent the board members. Even Ariana looked slightly surprised. She didn't expect such a big reaction from her company. Linda turned to the passengers. Please stay seated until instructed. But no one moved anyway. They were all watching Ariana as she stood slowly, gracefully, picking up her small bag. When she walked up the aisle, every passenger watched with awe, some with admiration, some with guilt for judging her earlier, some with inspiration. A mother whispered to her daughter, remember her. Remember how she handled everything. Ariana stopped near Mark. He looked up slowly, his eyes red and scared. Ma'am. I don't have words. I don't deserve forgiveness. Ariana studied him quietly, then spoke with a softness that carried more power than anger ever could. You made mistakes today, she said. Serious ones. But mistakes don't define people. What they learn from them does. Mark swallowed hard. I'll learn, ma'am. I promise. I'll change. Ariana nodded. I truly hope you do. Her calm kindness broke something inside him. He cried, silently, shoulders shaking. Passengers felt it too. Some even wiped tears. No one expected the end to feel this emotional. Ariana walked toward the exit, and the senior executives bowed their heads respectfully. Ms. Cole, we are deeply sorry for this incident, one of them said. We assure you, corrective actions will begin immediately. Ariana raised a hand softly. Please remember, this isn't about punishing one person. It's about building a company culture where everyone is treated with dignity. The executives nodded in agreement, humbled. As she stepped off the plane, dozens of passengers applauded, slowly at first, then louder. It wasn't applause for a billionaire. It was applause for a woman who showed the world that true strength is quiet, patient, and deeply human. Ariana paused, surprised, then gave a small, warm smile. Later, in a private lounge, she sat alone for a moment, thinking deeply. She didn't think about the insult, the shove, or the humiliation. She thought about the passengers who stood up for her, the lesson Mark learned, and the reminder life had given her. That power is not measured by wealth or position, but by how one uses it when tested. And in that quiet moment, she made a decision. She called her assistant and said, tomorrow, schedule a meeting. I want to create a new training program, for all crew members. Something that teaches humanity, respect, and kindness. Because Ariana didn't want revenge. She wanted change. And that was the difference between a person who owned a company and a leader who changed it. With that final thought, she stood, lifted her bag, and walked forward, calm, graceful, powerful. The world would remember what happened on that flight. But Ariana? She simply moved on, believing something better had just begun.